I'm Todd for G66. Welcome to another Tuesday tone tip. In today's video, I want to show you how I set up dual amps on the AXE-FX3, and I want to give you a couple of examples to play around with. So let's get straight into it. You can see in AXE Edit, I have got two amp blocks in parallel feeding into a cab block. We need to get the setup right on this, so let's do that before I play anything. I am using a stereo cab right here. I've selected exactly the same impulse response and loaded it into the first two slots. In this case, it's one of my own IRs. You can actually get this one for free from AXChange if you like, but loaded them up, panned them hard left and hard right, and as I said earlier, the input mode is stereo. With the amps, I'm using the Deluxe Verb Vibrato. More or less the stock settings. I haven't touched any of these knobs. All I have done is gone to the Ideal tab, and this top amp here, I have set the input select to left, and I have panned it all the way to the left. So this amp is going to be processing the left channel audio. On the second amp, again, stock settings except right input select and the balance to the right. So this is going to be processing the right channel of my audio. Now, if I play this, I've basically got nothing stereo in front of it that's special. There's no panning effects or anything like that. It's just going to sound like the amp at the stock settings, which is good because that's what we want at the start. So let's check that out. Alrighty, so that's a wonderful edge of breakup tone happening there. More than an edge of breakup tone really, it is starting to break up. A light breakup tone there. So this would be my first example. We've got these two amps with more or less identical settings except for the panning. So what we can do is use some kind of stereo effect in front of the amps. That would be the first application. You know, a lot of, I want to say, kind of vintage style tones, whether you're using stuff like vintage echoes or modulation effects, were traditionally run in front of an amp. They're the kind of classic tones from the 60s and 70s we all know and love. So let's get a delay in here to start with. I'm going to use the Stereo Mind Guy based on the Electro Harmonics Memory Man. This one's in stereo, and what I've done is set the left-right time ratio to 75%. You're going to hear these in stereo, but they're going to have a very different character than if I connected them after the cab. Basically, they're just going to sound dirtier and louder, and that's kind of the point with something like a Memory Man. So application one, stereo time-based effects in front of a pair of amps for the character tones. I absolutely love how gritty those echoes sound right there. If I connected it after the cabinet block, it would sound a lot cleaner, which I would probably prefer if I was using a heavily distorted sound, but for something like this, I think I prefer it in front of the amp. Another fun trick for this basic setup would be to emulate something like an old 70s chorus where one channel of the chorus output would be the modulated signal and the other would be dry. So in this case, I could just pop a chorus block right here on this top line, set the mix to 100%. I've also set the balance to left because this amp is panned to the left as well. This kind of gives you your Boss CE1 style vibe. Like I said earlier, this just has lots of kind of retro character, which I really like. I'm not saying it's better than running it behind the cab. It's just different. So that would be setup number one, where you have stereo time-based effects before a pair of amps. But you know, we've got 2 amps in here. I'm just going to shunt this chorus block for now. Let's go to scene 2 over here, because I've called this stereo setup number 2. Now we have the same amps, but I have set them differently. Let me show you the authentic controls. So my left channel, you can see more treble, less bass, and less drive than my right channel over here. They're still panned hard left and hard right. What this is going to do now, rather than sound just like dual mono for the main guitar tone, I'm going to have this big, wide sort of sound. Let's check it out. Really cool. I think this is probably my favorite setup if you're going for this kind of dual amps in stereo. You take more or less the same kind of tone and you just offset it slightly so it moves the perceived stereo image right out. It's really lovely to play around with, especially if you kind of hit it with something like, let's hit it with a mild drive pedal in front, not the precision drive, something a little more subtle. Let's just use the T808. I'll bring the drive down and the level up. We get this. You could of course expand on that and put 2 drive blocks in parallel. So different drives. We'll put the tube screamer over here, and I don't know, let's do something like put a fuzz over here. I covered this in my recent video on drives about running 2 drives in parallel. Now we've got different drives on different amp settings, I guess. So let's go for the fuzz face, something like that. What do we get? That's really fun, and just again, character. That's what we're going for with these kind of setups. So that's probably my favorite setup, you know, using different drives, slightly different amp settings. You can expand on that and actually just use 2 different amps, panned hard left and hard right as well. In this case, I've got the AC20 on the left channel, and again, just a deluxe verb on the right channel. The hardest thing about this is just balancing out the levels. You can see I've had to turn the AC20 up a little bit, but basically what I've gone for is the AC20 is a bit darker and grindier sounding, and the deluxe is a little bit chimier, and together we get this. That one's interesting there, where again, the delay there is feeding into amps with differing amounts of drive, so it's kind of going to push up the level of some of the repeats. I find this particular setup just a little bit tricky to deal with because it's really hard to balance out the amps once you start getting some drive and some kind of natural compression happening in there. So I think I like stereo setup number 2 just a little bit more, because using the same amp model, setting them slightly different, just makes everything kind of sound bigger. Trying to do the same thing with 2 amps like this, I don't like quite as much. What I do like though is taking this setup and making it a big dual mono setup. So all we would have to do there is this, go to the cab block and just pan these straight up the middle. We could also use different cab IRs as well. Like I'm just gonna, I don't know, select number 2 or something like that for this amp. So I've got the AC20 and I've got the deluxe verb. But what I can do with the AC20 is I want to blend in just a little bit of that grit kind of into my main deluxe verb tone. So this is going to be the main amp now, and I'll just bring the level right down over here and slowly blend it in. So we get this. That's really effective for that kind of rootsy rock tone I'm going for there. You can also do it for really heavy tones. So if I was to select something like, say, the Cameron CCV, and I'm going to set this up for like a really kind of mid-heavy guitar sound. I'll just push the mids right up there. And over here on channel D, I'm going to go for, not the CCV, let's go for something like a rectifier, something really filthy sounding. And I'm going to crank the treble up on this. I'll bring the bass down. I'm going to boost it with maybe the CC boost or something like that. But now the CCV is going to be my main amp tone, and my recto is going to be the thing that kind of gets blended in to add some more character. So let's take the level on that all the way down. I do need to pan this one to the right, pan this one to the left. So this is the left channel, and it is picking up on this particular cab. You can see cab 1 left. So this is picking up the left channel, but then it's repanning it to the center. So this is still a dual mono setup. So let's have a listen to it. We will blend in some recto as we go. Again, that one's kind of interesting. You can hear how one amp kind of brings in a different texture or a different character from the other amp. We could do that the other way around, where the recto is kind of our main sound, and I'm going to blend in the CCV, which is really mid-heavy. Let's have a listen to that. Again, that's a dual mono setup. So we had, what do we have? We had the same thing spread out stereo, so you can run your time-based effects in front of it. We had a variation on that where you're offsetting the settings on the same amp. We had that second setup, but with different amps. Then we pushed them together and did a dual mono blend. This is another dual mono blend. So lots of stuff to play around with when it comes to dual amps, depending on your situation. I think the main two ones for me would be with really kind of high gain tones like this, using the dual mono blend, or, you know, blending a Fender and a Vox style thing for like a rootsy thing, best of both worlds in each case. Or the second setup we did where it's the same amp, slightly offset, so you get this beautiful width happening with your tone, and you can still run stereo time-based effects in front of the amps if you want that type of character tone. If you have any other questions, let me know in the comments. I hope you picked up some useful tips and tricks today, and I will see you all next week. Take it easy.